Hi, I'm Seth Streeter, Mission Wealth Chief Impact Officer, and our firm's purpose is to empower people to realize true wealth. And we know that true wealth is about a lot more than optimizing your finances. It's about living a fulfilled life. These Inspired Talks are designed to help improve our lives by expanding our wealth across different dimensions. And today's conversation is about the impact dimension, one of the 12. Our hope is that we all can discover some new ways that we can all make a greater difference in the areas that matter most to us. So let's start with a quick question in the chat. What is a cause that you're currently passionate about? Let's take a look and see what causes our group is currently passionate about. Climate change. What else? What are we passionate about here? Put in the chat. Animal welfare, our church, environmental conservation, homelessness, ocean preservation, food security, supporting refugees and immigrants, helping people age well, my family, helping those less fortunate. Wonderful. Well, we have a passionate group here, and we're excited to jump in and think about ways that we all can amplify these causes that we care so much about. Let me share a few instructions for today's call. We will be recording this event, and we will email you top takeaways along with a video link. We will also allow time for questions with Mara. So if you have any questions as she goes through her presentation, please post those into the Q&A box. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. Use the chat box if you need any technical support or to respond to questions. And we will be utilizing small breakout groups in this meeting. So we're going to crowdsource some wisdom in very small groups of 4, and we look forward to you sharing with your peers and getting some great new ideas. And at the end, we will be sending out a survey, and we really do appreciate your feedback. So let's start with a poll. And the poll is to see how you're currently engaging in impact. And you can click more than one box here. So how are you currently engaging in impact? Are you a volunteer, and have you volunteered in the last 6 months? Are you a donor? Have you donated dollars in the last 6 months? Are you a board member? Have you served on a nonprofit board in the last 6 months? Are you an advocate? Do you actively speak about causes to raise awareness? Are you a convener? Do you bring people together related to a cause to help amplify the impact? So we'll give you a few more seconds here to fill out this poll, and then let's take a look at the results. All right, so 79% of us have volunteered. That's wonderful. 84% of us have given. Beautiful. We have a generous group. 42% are board members, have served on a nonprofit board. 26% think of themselves as advocates, actively speaking out. And 18% are conveners. So the numbers got a little bit smaller there. Well, we're excited to jump into ways we can think outside the box when it comes to the impact that we can make about these causes that are near and dear. And I couldn't think of a better resource to join us with this expansive thinking than Mara. Mara is the founder and CEO of Mara Impact, a social impact studio that blends creativity, innovation, and radical collaboration to solve the most urgent challenges today. Her clients include the Archwell Foundation, founded by Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. She advises on restoring trust in information, as well as Amplifier, a nonprofit art and media lab building campaigns to amplify the most important movements of our time. Previously, she led global partnerships at the Nike Foundation, where she focused on lifting adolescent girls out of poverty, founding the first innovation lab within the U.S. Census Bureau in the lead up to the 2020 census. And she started an entrepreneurship incubator in Cuba, where she eventually got kicked out. So maybe Mara can tell us about that. She led partnerships for the philanthropic organization Unfinished. Earlier in her career, Mara co-founded an organization training young filmmakers and citizen journalists in conflict zones and underreported communities. She lives in Los Angeles, where she is committed to personal growth, building community, and designing transformative experiences. Mara, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Seth. And it's such an honor to be here. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you all and seeing your faces soon. So I do have a very eclectic background in the impact space. And I've worked with a lot of brands you'll probably recognize, and some you might not. I've worked across the philanthropic space as well as the corporate space and nonprofits. And so I have this experience of, working across a lot of different domains, a lot of issue areas. Right now, I'm focused a lot on protecting democracy, but I've also worked on, diplomacy in places like Myanmar and Cuba. I've worked, Jaguar Land Rover and helping get clean and connected cars out in the world. And, with Unfinished, it's about, creating a more ethical, equitable digital future. So, got a lot of experience. And what I really want to emphasize today is that impact does not have to live in one type of box. Impact can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For me, it's about doing good at scale in ways that include, but are not limited to just philanthropy or just charity. And those things are wonderful. I also want to say that writing checks and volunteering those things are so important. Do not stop doing that. Those organizations, really, really need your support. And there are other ways that you could leverage your time, your money, in ways that have exponential impact, in ways that really excite you. So that's really what I'm here to talk about. You do have agency in your giving. You can craft a strategy in a way that really taps into your passions, your gifts, how you are uniquely positioned to contribute as a human being. So what other types of capital are you not deploying? Is it intellectual capital, spiritual, relationship capital? And are you coming at your giving approach from a place of curiosity versus obligation? Oh, I need to do this thing because that's what somebody else or society is telling me to do. No, like tap into who you are, tap into your own curiosities, always be learning, and that will sustain you over the long haul. So next slide, please. So I have 10 questions to ask yourself, as you craft a giving plan. The first one, which is the most obvious and the most important, is what excites you? What lights you up? What would you be thrilled to work on right now? What are your values? And what will sustain you over the long haul? We will share later a resource that can help you get in tune with how to match up your values with different causes. But this is the most important question to ask yourself, is really like what's possible. Expand your horizons of possibility, and think about what you're already just really excited by and invested in, and pay attention to when you stand up a little straighter and you get like really into something, and you can line up your giving strategies with that thing that is really animating you. So the second question, how can you get your family and personal networks involved? There's so much power in multi-generational giving. There's so much wisdom to be shared across these lines, especially as technology is, exponentially, growing at a rapid rate. And it's always changing. And, we can look to the younger generations to have some foresight into like how they're feeling and what the future might hold. And we have so much, the older generations have so much wisdom about, just life experience. And so how would you want to get your family involved? And who else would you be thrilled to collaborate with? It's giving us a much more joyful and enriching experience when you're working with people you love to work with. So think through, is there somebody in your own personal network who you just love teaming up with? How can you get them involved? What do they care about? What do your family members care about? What do other people in your network care about? And how can you find a common ground? Is there, I walk people through a process where there's a lot of different opinions about some issue or cause, and I'm able to facilitate this common ground around what is really lighting everybody up in the group. So can you make it joyful? Can you make it fun? Can you make it, even when the issues are really daunting and terrifying in some cases? I think there's still a way to add some levity to it so that you can sustain yourself over the long haul. And then who else is out there doing this work? Be a lightning rod. And what I mean by that is, once you define what it is that you care about and you start putting that out into the world, other people will find you. And that may mean just having conversations at around a dinner table. It could also mean writing posts on LinkedIn, writing articles for a blog. I've found that the more I just put myself out there, even if I haven't totally done the thing yet, you know, people will follow. If you build it, they will come. They will find you. And that is how I've found so many of the best people I've ever worked with. So slide 3. What are the leverage points in the system? There is a, I'll post another, or we'll post a link in the chat, but there's an author called Donella Meadows, and she writes about systems thinking. So if you're thinking about a particular issue, like, you know, refugee resettlement, for example, you have to look at the larger dynamics and the roots of the problems and the bottlenecks in order to really have exponential impact. So leverage points are basically places within a complex system. So that could be a corporation, an economy, a city, an ecosystem, where one small shift can produce massive changes in everything. So looking at the whole ecosystem, what will have 1,000 times impact versus just 10x. So just looking at the people, relationships, dynamics, policies, et cetera. I'll give you an example of this on the next slide. So when I was at the Nike Foundation, everything we did was around this initiative that we called the Girl Effect. And where we started was, we want to address global poverty. And where we arrived was, we have to invest in girls, specifically adolescent girls. Why? Well, we did this study with the World Bank. We called it the Girl Effect Dividend. And we found that when you invest in a girl, it actually adds GDP to whole countries. And that's because women, when they are earning safe income, will reinvest that income back into their community and their family, their community, and the greater society at higher rates than men. So we also discovered that, you know, by the time a girl reaches adulthood, oftentimes she's already fallen into the trap of poverty. She may have experienced early marriage or early pregnancy, or you know, contracted HIV, or all these other barriers to becoming a successful and thriving woman. So that's why we decided to invest in girls, and we actually showed how much of an impact it makes on the entire system. So this impacts boys and men as well. Next slide, please. XPRIZE is another great example. I haven't worked directly with them, but I've always admired their work. So this is one of their prizes that they posted on their website lately. It's a $100 million prize around healthy aging. I think I saw somebody here who's passionate about that. This prize model allows for so many different leverage points to be experimented with. So there's like tons, instead of just like, let's try this thing over here and let's try this thing over here, you're getting hundreds or thousands of people to figure out what those leverage points are. In this case, it's technological, but this can have outsized returns, which is why they are investing so much in these prizes, because it's just, you get to so many different solutions faster, and the ones that are really working rise to the top. And that will create, you know, again, the leverage points in the entire system. So next slide, please. How can you leverage your own or your company's strengths? This is another case study from the Nike Foundation. So what is Nike great at? lots of things, but basically branding and storytelling. And, we can turn a basic pair of shoes into an aspiration, a dream, a vision. And so when we started working in places like Rwanda, Ethiopia, Nigeria, India, we were very actively, getting resources to girls living in poverty. But we also realized that we needed to change culture because in a lot of the places where we worked, girls didn't have a lot of value in the society. So we thought, let's tap into what Nike's strength is, and let's bring on board Wyden and Kennedy, our brand agency that coined Just Do It and Bo Knows, and let's build beautiful brands around girl power. And so in Ethiopia, we started a girl band that is now one of the most popular music groups in Ethiopia. And embedded in their music, and there's a TV program about them, are the messages that we're trying to send around ending domestic violence and ending child marriage and things like this. But it's not just in a PSA, it's part of this brand that people love. And so it really is starting to change perceptions in society. In Rwanda, we started a teen girl magazine called Niña Minga. And again, we got girls themselves to actually contribute, and we train them as journalists and as photographers, and it's a brand that is now recognized across the country. So all of this to say is that Nike's great at storytelling and brand building, but think about what your company is good at and how can you harness that potential to really make an impact on society. Next slide, please. How can you innovate your funding model? You can join a giving circle. There's a group that I'm familiar with called Philanthropy Together that is about optimizing that giving circle model. And now there's thousands of these giving circles around the world, where basically if there's a foundation, some kind of philanthropy, or an individual donor that's working on a specific cause, it's really about teaming up with others who care about the same things, and really being able to amplify that impact. So, it's more funding can do more for the world. And also there's more minds that are being put towards this cause. And that can be a really effective way to innovate the funding model. And you have to ask yourself maybe think beyond just having or supporting a nonprofit. Maybe there could be a for-profit model where there's impact investing, or it's a social enterprise where it's a company that is self-sustaining financially, but is also doing good for the world. So don't confine yourself just to the nonprofit model. There's pros and cons to both. In some cases, it really makes sense to have a nonprofit or a foundation. In some cases, there could be a hybrid model where you have both. You combine philanthropy and investment. Seth is also going to, speak a little more later to ESG investing, but that's another way to maximize your dollar for good. How can you strengthen existing organizations? This is really just to say, don't reinvent the wheel. If you feel like you have, certain leadership capacities or certain ideas, do a good landscape analysis of who's already out there doing what, and how can you lend your vision in leadership to existing organizations that are already doing that? Of course, if there's an openness on their end to receive your help. And how can you foster a spirit of innovation and experimentation within your giving? So, this is all to say you don't need to start up a whole new thing, particularly if there already are organizations out there and willing to collaborate with you. Think about your own capacity as a leader and how can you lend that leadership there. This may, come in the form of a board seat. I saw a lot of people here are on boards. And there may be other ways that you can get involved in an organization. Again, beyond writing a check, you might be able to get involved without necessarily needing to take on the full responsibility of a board seat. And if you are on a board, then that's wonderful. And I'm sure you are already doing this where you're lending your vision and your leadership to the organization in that way. Keep doing that. Next slide, please. This one is so important. How can you engage the local community? Before I embark on any kind of program, I spend a lot of time in the field understanding who that end user is, or that end recipient, the end beneficiary is. Even if it's something like climate change, where it's harder to identify, a person or persona associated with that, think about who climate change is impacting most deeply and go out and talk to them. The first thing you might want to do is identify proximal leaders and the local innovators. Proximal leaders are basically, it's this idea that the people who are closest to the problem are the ones who have the best solutions. So find out who are the leaders who have experienced, if it's poverty, someone who's already experienced poverty but is also doing something really innovative in their local community. Go out there, talk to them, go on a listening and learning tour if there's a cause that's close to your heart that is not already in your local community, and you're just trying to, help out another local community. I always prefer to, this is a little controversial, but to just go and listen and learn versus just, starting off building a well or something like that, because you really want to understand these different dynamics and how people, how the culture works. It's when you do this, the solutions are much more culturally relevant, and it gives the local people more of a sense of agency versus someone from the outside saying, here's what you should be doing. So the more that you increase buy-in from local communities, the more sustainable that solution will be over time. And really ensure that the local stakeholders are bought in and involved every step of the way. I'll give you an example of this. This is me in Cuba. Right behind us is the newly opened US Embassy. So I was out there as relations between the US and Cuba started to thaw. And also the Cuban government was slowly starting to allow for a little bit more private business. So we ended up talking to a lot of local entrepreneurs there, and they told us what they needed. They said, we we need support for we need business expertise, and we want some of your innovation, like how do you innovate in the US? So we brought a group of American and global entrepreneurs out to Havana, and we did workshopping, and we supported them in the growth of their companies. And it wasn't just us teaching them, they were also teaching us about how their system works and the way that they do things. So it was a really beautiful exchange. And I think a really good example of not us, us not assuming what they needed. It was really just like we started off by just listening, just talking to a lot of people. And then we arrived at this solution, this need, for more business skills. So that's what we did there. Next slide. How can you be a bridge builder? Can you think outside the box of who would typically solve a particular challenge? And how can you harness the power of partnerships across sectors and disciplines? So if you're working on education, for example, how might you involve engineers or the entertainment industry, or like an area that is not typically associated with that particular cause, because they'll bring a very different perspective. And sometimes it's really helpful to get that outside perspective. And so a lot of what I do in my work and with my new company is I bring people together across a lot of different disciplines to all work together on a shared mission. And that creates so much richer and more diverse solutions than if you were to just stay within the confines of one particular issue. So think about, what partners you might want to involve, and think a little outside the box of who that might be. If there's just someone who's absolutely a brilliant thinker who might not have thought about the cause that you care about, you might still want to involve them and just see what they think about it. So next slide. So when I was the director of innovation at the US Census Bureau, leading up to the 2020 census. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but we did do pretty innovative things. One of the things we were trying to do was, show the public why it's important to take the census. So the census is what determines money and power in this country, and it determines how many congressional seats each state gets, and it determines how funding gets into communities for things like parks and education and roads and bridges. And so we had a huge task to convince over 300 million people why this is important. And we had to do it in a language that was culturally relevant to the people that we were trying to reach. So what we did was we brought in, of course, the usual suspects, the government officials, the experts, the data scientists. But we also brought in business leaders. We brought in filmmakers, designers, artists, TV writers, and together we were able to create this tapestry of stories and really interesting and funny and cool content that was reaching the people we were trying to reach. So this is an example of thinking outside the typical government box and bringing in other people who might have other types of strategies. One more example of this, also at the Census Bureau. So once we have the data, what are we doing with that data? How are we improving the lives of the American public with the data? We started something called the Opportunity Project that was about bringing together the private sector with data experts from the Census Bureau to create different digital tools that would improve people's lives through data. So by working with companies like Microsoft and Cisco and Google and all these different startups, we worked with developers to create tools that would connect cancer patients with clinical trials, connect veterans with jobs, reduce plastic waste in the oceans, help small businesses thrive in local communities, use geospatial data for disaster preparedness. There's all these different issues that data could help solve. And by looking outside of our government walls and working with companies and technologists, we were able to create so many more solutions. What's the story? Storytelling, I think, is so foundational to any cause that you're working on. How can you leverage the power of storytelling to achieve the kind of impact you're working towards? And, you really have to, I love working with storytellers and, I live in LA, so I'm surrounded by them. That's really what's going to carry your message. But it's also who the messengers are. Is there somebody who's trusted in the community that you're trying to reach who can deliver that message in a way that is better than any outsider? And then this one's much more personal, but how can you hone your personal brand? Think about, who you are as a person, and will that build trust for the cause that you're championing? What's a story of you as a messenger and as somebody who is really taking your cause as far as you can? So think about what your story is, and think about, how you can get it out into the world. Last slide, please. Stay curious. The world is changing so fast. It's always evolving. It really is evolving at a more rapid pace than ever before, especially with AI and all these technological advancements. We have to stay open. We have to stay curious and always in lifelong learning mode. Our job is never done. We'll never have all of the right solutions because the goalposts are going to change. So I think the most important thing that you can do as our world is changing is to be really adaptive to those changes and stay very, very open to what's happening and what the solutions might be. And finally, how are you staying curious about yourself? Are you committed to learning as an individual? How are you changing yourself? Because the more we can work on our own personal growth, the more effective we'll be in the world.
Yeah, that's what's nice when we stay curious, as Mara shared, and we kind of do our listening and learning exercises. We find there's a lot of other people who also are touched in similar ways, and we bring different gifts to the table. And so we're never alone. And I think that's, one tragedy of a lot of nonprofits is they're in such a silo, not always cross collaborating with others that have that shared passion. So how can we be bridge builders, as she said? How can we be conveners to maybe bring different nonprofits or businesses with a passion or individual donors with a passion together? Well, let's go now into questions. So Mara, we're going to give you some rapid fire questions. First,
All right.
let's start with
Ready.
let's start with one from the chat, which really talks about at what pace do you encourage people to get involved with an organization? So if someone's passionate, they find an organization that's around a cause they care about, how do you advise them to get involved at what pace with this organization?
At your pace, at their pace. It's a negotiation. So if you are ready to fully dive in and you want to give it your all, that's great. If you just have 1 hour a week, do it at that pace. And of course, that has to match the capacity of the organization to receive that support. So most of the time, and hopefully the organization you're wanting to support will have an openness to receiving your gifts and your whatever you have to bring to the table. And it's a conversation with them. And don't assume what they need. Ask a lot of questions and understand the way that they work, and then offer as much as they're willing to take, or as little. And again, like, you don't have to fully commit your entire life to this one organization or this one cause. You can do it in baby steps. So wherever you are today, I would say, is the pace you should go.
Right. One issue that we see is groups become very divisive. They're either pro or con, or they believe in this, but they don't believe in that. And there's a lot of othering that goes on. So I would love to hear, what are your ideas when you try to bring these disparate groups together that they can find common ground and start to collaborate with less of a blaming game? What are ways that you create that common ground?
You have to set the right tone from the beginning. So I convene a lot of people in person, also over Zoom like this. You have to lay some ground rules, like assume good intent from the other person, and just know that this is a place where people's opinions can really diverge. So it takes strong facilitation, but it also takes setting the tone of, we are all in this together. We're here to expand and to support one another. And then, I think that once you really dive into an issue, we actually have a lot more in common than is, projected in the media and in other places. There's a fabulous organization called More in Common. If you want to look them up, moreincommon.org, that actually proves this. So if there's a controversial issue that seems like it's really tearing our country or the world apart, when you actually go into the policies of what that issue is, most people actually agree more than they disagree. And so, I think asking the right questions of the group, and getting people to provide ideas and solutions around that thing, and doing it in a really playful way, I think, is also really important. So often we are stuck in these conferences that can be quite boring and dry. And I think we need more playfulness. And that playfulness is what disarms us and connects us as human beings. When we first met with that Cuban group, it was Americans and Cubans. They didn't know anything about each other. We started with a giant game of rock, paper, scissors as an icebreaker. And it was like, oh my God, it just completely opened us up to just enjoy each other as human beings. And then we could kind of like really dive into, our different cultures and ideas. So I really highly recommend always, bringing a little levity to the room.
I had the opportunity to interview Madeleine Albright a few years ago when she had the UN, and there's very conflicting groups. I said, how did you bring people together? Because she was known to do that. And she said she would start her meetings taking the most opposing people, putting them in a one-on-one, and ask them a question about their childhood. What was it like when you grew up? And you might take a very conservative with a very liberal, but they talked about how they both were raised in a farming family and they both had chores, and they started to see each other, in the other. And then when they came to the issues, they had less of a divisive energy between them.
Oh, that's such a good point. I actually attended a dinner recently where it's very obvious that the majority of the people there were of a very different political ideology than myself. And we had this like Jeffersonian style dinner where, similar to that, the question was about like um, some sort of pain from our childhood and how we were able to overcome that. And it was all based around storytelling, and it really helped us to just see each other's humanity, and it was really beautiful.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, we have some questions here. So, wanting to
Okay.
inspire our future young adult leaders, what inspired you and gave you courage to take your work and passion to Cuba?
Mm. There's a few different ways I can answer this question because the courage and the passion came before the Cuba opportunity, which is a whole story in and of itself. When I was 24 years old, I came across a young philanthropist named Sophie Stenbeck, who's still incredibly philanthropic. She comes from a big media family in Europe, and we formed a friendship, and she saw my potential and really believed in me. And we started a nonprofit together, teaching citizen journalists in underreported and conflict zones. And being able to try something at such a young age and seeing it actually work started to give me more and more confidence to keep going and keep experimenting. So when this Cuba opportunity came around, it was led by a guy named Mickey Bergman, who is a hostage negotiator, and he's a dear friend of mine. He's a Nobel Prize nominee, worked very closely with the late Governor Bill Richardson, who just passed away a few months ago. And he works with dictators and North Koreans, Iranians, and it has been incredibly successful in bringing hostages home, including Brittany Griner from Russian prison. And so he was leading these delegations. It was a program called Fringe Diplomacy, which is the idea that when you build these people-to-people relationships, that can often do more than what like governments can do around the negotiation table. So he led delegations. I'll try to condense the story because I know we're low on time, but we basically saw that our tour guide was using an app, which was so wild because they didn't have internet at the time. We're like, what's this? Who's building an app? And there was like, there were all these regulations around even being able to start a business. So we just started with curiosity, and we ended up finding the guy who built this app. It was like the Yelp of Cuba. It was like restaurant reviews. It works entirely offline. There's a whole backstory to that, but basically our curiosity led us to find this person. And then we started asking that person questions. What do you need? What would be helpful? And he said it would be helpful to really get your business expertise. So we went back to Cuba a couple months later and brought all these business leaders there, and the rest is history.
Oh, amazing. So, Amanda shares that she feels it's important to create one's own mission statement to help us focus on one's area of importance and priority. And that probably includes some values work, which we're going to send everyone a worksheet to kind of work on your values. But do you have any thoughts on the merits of building one's own mission statement?
It's everything. That's why it was kind of slide number one. I think I had different language for it, but that really is about building your mission statement because it's coming into tune with who you are, what you care about, what cause you want what cause is lighting you up. And so to be able to articulate that in just a sentence or a couple of sentences will help drive everything else. So you want to get as clear as you can about what it is that you want to do, what's the impact you want to have on the world. So if you can write your own personal mission statement, I really, really encourage that.
Mhm. It's easy to be reactive and just go to the chicken dinner gala that our next door neighbor invites us to instead of being really clear. What causes do I care about? How do I want to focus my efforts and go deeper with fewer instead of shallow with many? And I
Yeah.
think that's a great opportunity to have that clarity.
Yeah.
So Ralph would love to learn a little bit more about Nike from your experience there. Do you see them as being a leading company at making philanthropic contributions to the needs of society? Did you see them caring about society at large, and were they a strong contributor?
Yeah, absolutely. The foundation has transformed since I was there 10 years ago. But we teamed up with Peter and Jennifer Buffett, the Buffett kids, and they put in 100 million. We had a huge endowment, and we were doing so much on the foundation side, but there also was within the company, they were really about kind of building into their DNA sustainability. And so there was a whole other division at Nike that was about like how to actually ensure that the company at large is doing good. So yeah, I really thought of them as contributing some good things to society for sure.
Amazing. So for those on the call who are younger, or for those who have children or grandchildren that are, say, around young 20s, they're passionate about making a difference in the world. What advice, Mara, would you give to your 20-year-old self, this young impact maker woman who wanted to go out there and make a splash? What advice would you give them today, now that you've had some experience?
Believe in yourself, first of all. Know that you can do anything. Even as a 20-year-old, I had no money. I didn't think I had a lot of resources, and I still put myself out there and did what I could. And I was always in learning mode. There's something about being of a younger generation that allows for more experimentation, because the older we get, the more, blocks we have in our head around what we're capable of. And so, stay hungry, and stay curious, but also don't be stupid. Like I made a lot of stupid mistakes, as all young people do, and all older people do as well. So don't be so overconfident where you're telling everybody what needs to happen. Just like really believe in your ability to understand what real needs are and being able to contribute to that.
Beautiful. Well, Mara, thank you so much for sharing these
Oh.
insights and your personal examples, and helping us to just expand what's possible when it comes to us caring. Everyone on this call cares, and we're showing up in ways, but maybe we can show up more fully and in innovative ways and have fun doing it with a little more playfulness.